Members, this is the appointed time and we have a quorum, so I call this meeting to order. We have two sessions today. After the close of the first session, we will take a 10-minute break, and the second session will begin at 5:40 p.m. I remind members that if there is any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to any item for today's meeting, then please disclose the nature of your interest before you speak in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure. May I also remind members to take note of the voting requirement where there is direct pecuniary interest in accordance with Rule 84 of the ROP. Now we are going to discuss FCR 2017-18-5. This is to invite members to endorse the proposal put forward at the 16th of March meeting. That is the proposal set out in PWSC 2016-17-39 to upgrade 781CL to Category A at an estimated cost of $284.8 million in the MOD prices for the construction of infrastructure to support the proposed public housing development in Area 54, Tung Chung. Members of the PWSC discussed the item at the meeting of the 16th of March 2017. The administration has also provided a supplementary paper. And at the FC, this item was discussed for 21 minutes at the meeting on the 26th of May. The administration has also provided an information paper. I remind members that the questions raised at this committee meeting should be directly relevant to the item's paper, and members should refrain from repeating the points made by other members or points raised at the subcommittee. As for policy issues, those items should be discussed at the panel meeting or council meeting. I first declare that I am not independent, non-executive director of East Asia Bank, and we have from the administration to answer members' questions, Mr. Leung. Well, Mr. Editor, this is a point of order. Because according to the media, you are planning to make use of the council slot on Thursday for the FC meeting. Can I confirm this with you, that this is your plan? This is not my plan. This is the proposal being discussed by the non-establishment camp, the pro-establishment camp. At the moment, this is not my decision. You did not raise this proposal? No, I have not thought of this clever way. So what's the less clever way that you've come up with? I am thinking of having additional meetings such as those on Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. So please come back to the item. Mr. Eddie Ju, it's your turn. You are first in the line. First time, 5 minutes. Please raise questions in relation to this item. Thank you, Chairman. For Area 54 Tung Chung, this is an HOS project. My question is this. We have Mr. Kenneth Leung here, and it is not desirable because I want to ask about the housing department's plan. Does it mean that for Area 54 of Tung Chung, the development will be oriented in such a way that residents can enjoy the sea view, and then the HA will be able to reap a bigger profit for other projects? Is that the justification, such that Area 54 will now have an HOS project? Mr. Editor, I think you raised the same question at the PWSC meeting. Dr. Loy Kwok, chairman at the time, believed that it was a policy issue. I forgot.
Okay. 好啦，咁即係政府當時。
The administration at that time replied to your question, but perhaps I'll invite the administration to reply again, but please refrain from discussing policy issues. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Thank you, Chairman. In relation to projects being developed, including public and subsidized housing project, the ratio is 75% to 25%, which is the same ratio as proposed or similar ratio as proposed in the long-term housing strategy. As for Area 54, the development will be an HOS project for sale, and in November, December, the administration already briefed members on the relevant developments. Thank you. Please continue, Mr. Chu. Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry, I didn't catch you. You talk about 75 and 25%. Is it territory-wide or is it confined to Tung Chung? I am referring to Tung Chung New Town, including the existing public rental housing and also public housing being developed. The ratio is roughly 75% to 25%. Thank you, Chairman. So one question stemming from this is this. Let's take it that this will be an HOS project. For Choi Hing Court in Choi Hong, the unit price is $7,700 per square foot. So to claim that you use a standard of giving a 30% discount in setting the price for HOS flats as per the market rate, I wonder if there will be any price adjustment for the HOS development. Well, Mr. Chu, this question is really a major policy issue, and I think you should follow up on the matter at the panel, because Mr. Leung is here as the chief civil engineer, and I don't think you can get any good answer from him. That's why, Chairman, I think you should remind the administration not to only invite the chief engineer to be here. We should be fair to Mr. Leung, because if you allow the administration to send only an engineer here, then we won't be able to have any discussion. I'm not asking something very vague. I'm asking about Area 54, and it has to do with the funding application. How can you ask that engineer to explain to us? Well, if you have read the paper, I think that this is about infrastructure works at Area 54. I think for pricing matters, it will be determined later. But I think pricing is also a factor for me to consider whether to approve the funding for infrastructure works. Well, it's an HOS flat. Well, just now I asked public housing, so I asked. You said that the scope was too wide, so I'm confining myself to HOS. I'm trying my best to accommodate members, but please also understand that as chairman, and if the rules of procedure sets out so clearly that policy matters should not be discussed here. But let's stop the argument and let him answer the question, please. Mr. Leung, anything to add? Well, because the policy issue is undertaken by other colleagues, I'm afraid I cannot give you further information here. Please submit a written question. I think it will be forwarded to the relevant policy bureau so that you can have an answer. Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Chairman. I think this Area 54 development has been discussed in the District Council, and my question is this. In that area and the vicinity, we're seeing more and more developments, private and public ones. And the population is increasing. So for the new town, and I'm not referring to Area 54, but I think that the administration will know very well, be it private developments or Dongwei Estate, with increasing population. At present, we already see a major traffic problem because of lack of or insufficient transport service. We need to ask bus companies to have more departures to meet passenger demand. Now, there is another HOS development as proposed, and we understand that there is a need to develop housing. But let's say with 10,000 more in the district population, I want to know what you're going to do about traffic. For example, for 37M, this bus route, we have been urging the bus company to increase the frequency. So for bus routes, do you have any thoughts in the light of new developments in the area? Mr. Leung. Thank you, Chairman. About the Area 54 development, in terms of transport infrastructure, there will be facilities provided to tie in with enhanced public transport service. In the vicinity of Area 54, there will be a number of bus terminals to meet with the enhanced public transport service in the future. And the Transport Department will monitor the situation. 1 or 2 years before completion of a development project, the Transport Department will review the passenger demand and the service level and consult the District Council before finalizing on the transport arrangements. Chairman, I just want to add one point. According to our experience in relation to 37M, I think that you should act earlier because you should have a preliminary assessment. You should not wait until the population intake is completed before you formulate any plan. Otherwise, you see a repeat of the same problem and that there will be public outcry over the lack of public transport service. I don't think this should be underestimated. 1 or 2 years before population intake, you are going to conduct an assessment, and if you believe that there is a need to have more bus routes or increase service level, you should do it as soon as possible to prevent public outcry. Mr. Leung, anything to add? We, along with the Transport Department, will closely monitor the situation, and if necessary, will enhance the public transport service. Mr. Andrew Wen. Thank you, Chairman. I'm also concerned about transport and traffic. I can't see anything in the paper. In relation to the traffic impact assessment, I want to know whether this has been done. Well, Chairman, you talking about Mr. Eddie Ju's question. I think it makes sense because the demographics would have an impact on the public transport service and the infrastructure works required together with the relevant expenditure as to whether it's reasonable. Anyway, the point is we need to know whether it's an HOS or a public rental housing project so that we will see whether the figures are reasonable. I can't see any community and recreational facilities here. Is there any provision of these facilities? And also about Mr. Ediju's question, we need to know the demographics, the social class, for example, whether these residents would be working in Lantau or the airport. I think these questions have to be answered. I don't want to cause Mr. Leung any trouble. I think that Mr. Ediju only used the same logic in his question as Mr. Holden Chow. Mr. Leung. Well, first, I think Mr. Lam, Director of Civil Engineering and Development, will answer his question on the TIA. As for community facilities in Area 54 of Tung Chung, supporting facilities will be provided. For example, kindergarten, badminton court, and basketball court, in accordance with the standards laid down in the Hong Kong Planning Standards and Guidelines. TIA, Chairman. Before we commence this project, we have conducted a traffic impact assessment to assess the impact of the infrastructure works on the transport network nearby, and the impact is insignificant. In terms of the Tung Chung New Town development, at that time, another assessment on the railway, the transport network in the vicinity was also conducted. According to the information given, Chairman, and according to the oral replies, I think that we cannot decide whether this plan is reasonable or not, and I do believe that members' questions are reasonable. The type of development and the social class of residents will decide whether they drive or they take buses to work and where they work. Well, I believe that in the past we didn't have this culture of dwelling on these issues. But now, for example, for the construction of a single two-lane carriageway, it's such a simple description, and it is very difficult for us to ask follow-up questions. I hope that other specific questions can be provided with a written answer. Dr. Edward Yu. First of all, we need to thank Mr. Leung, the Chief Civil Engineer, because we asked you for a lot of information on why funding application has to be approved in such a short period of time. We were given information, but we did not have proof of this information. So I'll see if Mr. Leung can explain to us in relation to the construction cost of the sewers. The cost is on the high side because along the long stretch of the road, there are other construction sites, and we need to prevent any delay caused to construction sites nearby, causing a breach of contract of these projects because of a delay of this project. Can you explain that, Mr. Leung? I'll defer to Mr. David Low, Chief Engineer of the CEDD, to give you an answer. Mr. Low. The construction cost of the sewers are subject to a number of factors. For example, the sewer would need to traverse the North Lantau Highway and Airport Express line. So during the construction, we need to be very careful, and we're also going to use a certain construction method in the laying of sewers, and also the same method will be used at road junctions. Comparing to the open excavation approach, the construction cost is therefore higher. Well, you answered the part about construction costs, but can you tell me why it is so urgent and how is it related to sites nearby? Opposite Area 54, we have a hotel site in Area 53A, and construction is underway. As we construct sewers for this area, connection will be made to the hotel development in Area 53A. So the construction of sewers is not just for Area 54, but Area 53A, the hotel development. So let's say if there is a delay for the development in Area 54, what impact does it have on Area 53A? Does it mean that there won't be any sewers? According to the contract, they are required to build a provisional sewage treatment facility. So if there is a delay for this project, they will need to pay more for their facility. So it doesn't affect their contract. They will need to build a temporary one, but ultimately they will be connected to our sewers. So can you just answer this question? Well, even if there is a delay for Area 54A, there is no impact on Area 53A because they have their own temporary facility. Yes, the operation itself will not be affected, only that the operational cost will be higher. But that's a private project, is that right? If the cost of their project is higher, then it's not related to the item being discussed here.
Mr.
Yu Si-wing, I'd like to ask about Area 53A. Well, it's a hotel project, but what about the scale of the project? How big will it be? And if it's too big, then because in area 54 there is only a coach bus parking space, and if there are tours there, then they will have to identify a parking space for coach buses to park. So will there be other parking spaces available for coach buses? And if there's only one in area 54, then will it become a problem, resulting in problems caused to residents in area 54? Chairman, with regard to parking space for coach buses, in fact, in the PWSC paper, in enclosure 2, as you can see on the top left-hand corner, that is towards the northwestern end, you see that there is a parking area for coach buses, and in that area about 7 coach buses can be parked. And given the fact that we have already set aside a parking area for coach buses, so coach buses going there can park there. What about the scale of the hotel in area 53A? Have you done any projection as to how many coach buses will be going there at the same time, and whether 7 parking spaces will be adequate? And if there are more, then will there be other parking spaces available nearby for parking for coach buses? With regard to the projection of the utilization of the parking space, that's not within our portfolio. That's why I don't have the information with me. Chairman, if that's the case, all right, on this occasion, you're doing planning here. So can you seek clarification on our behalf so that you can provide us with a supplementary information paper, because we don't want to affect the residents there. Thank you, Chairman. We can talk to the relevant department to see if we can provide the supplementary information later to members. All right, thank you. Dr. Fernando Jiang, 4 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman, and I thank the department for the supplementary information, because last time I was also asking about the development, and of course when in conjunction with Liantang and also Area 56. If you look at the overall development in Tung Chung, we are talking about a population of about 120,000-130,000, but then in the future it's going to rise to some 270,000. So whenever there is any development of a new district, we will have to look at the overall planning. But then regrettably, we don't have the planning department people here. We only have engineers to tell us the technical issues. But then I'd like to make further inquiries on the basis of the supplementary information paper. Well, you're talking about area 54 and 56, and 53A is an hotel. But then in areas 54 and 56, there will be welfare facilities, including a kindergarten and also some residential homes. But then if you look at the overall situation in Tung Chung, when it comes to welfare facilities, there is a very acute shortage of such facilities. So what I'd like to know is in the new developments, so can I focus on areas 54 and 56? In those two areas, first of all, you said that there will be a residential homes for the severely mentally handicapped, and also a home for the disabled. But then what about the supported hostels, and also residential care homes for the disabled with different degrees of disabilities? So overall speaking, will there be such planning for those in needs in Tung Chung? Thank you, Dr. Jiang, for your question. With regard to the extended development area in Tung Chung, earlier on at the PWSC meeting on the 31st of May, we already answered questions in those areas, and the Development Bureau and also the Labor and Welfare Bureau already gave answers. So you can also make reference to the paper 184. I think the information has been provided to us. You don't need to repeat that. But then that's the supplementary paper provided by the Development Bureau, and in that paper, it talks about the Tung Chung extended area and also the welfare facilities to be provided. So that paper, in that paper, para 14 talks about all the facilities that will be provided. So that's in the extended area and also the welfare facilities to be provided in that area. But Chairman, the problem is in Tung Chung, setting aside the new facilities to be developed, we do have an acute shortage of these facilities. For example, for sheltered workshop and also residential care homes for the moderately physically handicapped, and also children's home for the mentally handicapped, and so on. Well, it's zero provision. There is none. So if you look at the overall Tung Chung planning, well, Chairman, I might have gone beyond the scope of discussion today. But then I'd like to know, in Tung Chung, as well as in the other nearby areas in Tung Chung, well, these are welfare facilities that are in severe shortage. So can we have an overall planning for those facilities instead of, well, just giving us some piecemeal information whenever we put the question to you? So do you have such a planning mechanism in place? Can you try and answer the question first? Well, in simple terms, Chairman, thank you for your question. Well, in the Tung Chung development area, we have different sites available for GIC development. And I'm sure the planning department or the development bureau will be looking at the overall situation in reviewing the need. Thank you. In fact, we don't have that paper with us now, but then there is another paper available. So if you need it, we can give it to you. Next, Mr. Eddie Chu. Thank you, Chairman. Previously, I think when we discussed the issue at the PWSC meeting, we already talked about Area 54 and where are the residents going to do their shopping or get their grocery items in the future. Well, we were told that they could go to Area 56. There is an estate there, and that's about 10+ minutes walk. So I tried to make use of the mobile labs provided by the Lands Department in measuring the distance between the two areas, and then so I tried to do it from the center of Area 54, and I tried to pretend that if I walk from there to Area 56, and if I walk in a straight line, that would amount to something like 15 kilometers. So for an elderly or elder living in Area 54, if he's to carry a bag of grocery items, all right, from Thong Long and Shan Wui, there is no bypass or shortcut, so you will have to walk the long distance before you can reach the wet market. So is the administration suggesting that this is an appropriate way for them to buy their grocery items? And if that's not the case, then in Area 54, definitely there should be GIC facilities available. How come you don't have a shopping center or market facilities available in Area 54? Mr. Leung, any response from you? Thank you, Chairman. Maybe I'll ask Mr. Tam from the Housing Department to respond to that. Yes, Ms. Tam. Thank you. Well, in making planning for Housing Department, we have to look at the surrounding facilities in determining if we need to put in certain facilities in that development. Well, in planning for the development in Area 54, we have already got commercial facilities and also shopping facilities in the neighborhood. That's why in Area 54 we don't have a wet market there. If you look at the distance, all right, actually is quite close to the entrance to Area 54. So I don't think it's right to say that you should measure the distance from the center of Area 54 to the center of Area 56. And if you look at the development in Area 54, there are two exit points, and one would be very close to Area 56. And on top of that, well, in Area 54, we also have commercial facilities available. For example, there is a one-story commercial facility. So in considering the surrounding facilities, we believe that they are already quite adequate. But then do you have a standard? For example, for a wet market, let's say within a radius of 1 kilometer, do you think that is acceptable? So do you have a standard so you can share with us? Well, just now I was talking about whether or not it's within 1 kilometer or 800 meters. Well, we believe that if there is one available in the neighboring housing estate, then the facility should be able to provide for the need of the estate in the new development. Okay, last time we argued about typo. Sorry. Well, we talked about typo, and apparently you said that the supermarkets would already have wet markets, and then subsequently you said that there would be 45 stores. So you said that there would be a one-story commercial facility. So would there be a supermarket which can take care of part of the needs of the residents so that they don't have to walk that long distance, so that they don't have to walk 800 meters before they can go to the neighboring housing estate? All right, for the one-story shopping facility in Area 54, so if you look at the target completion date, well, 1 year before the completion date, we would be looking at the trades that would be suitable to be put in there, and if necessary, we can also have some shopping streets so that fresh fruit items can be sold, and there might also be supermarket-like stores. So we will have to look at the overall situation by then, before the completion date. Well, for shopping of grocery stores and so on, I suggest that I would expect that to have been discussed at the District Council meeting, right, Mr. Leung? Well, this is a PWP item, but then for housing project development, they should have been discussed at the relevant District Council meetings on several occasions, and I'm sure the Housing Department would be looking at the support facilities and also the number of units to be built, and also the expected construction period and so on. They would have provided the information to the District Council and sought their approval there. And according to my understanding, there's no objection raised by the relevant District Councils. Yes, if you look at the paper, we are talking about new carriageways and also new walkways, footpaths, cycle track, and cycle parking area, and so on. So please focus on that. Next question, please. Chairman. Well, so apparently we can't even ask questions concerning traffic and transportation, right? So it's about future traffic or transport planning. Well, Eddie Chu, I'm not going to argue with you as to what would be permitted, what not. And even if you digress a little bit, I won't just disallow it. Because you're talking about traffic. That's why I said that, well, you will have to walk 1 kilometer before you can get to any wet market. Well, I would not disallow you in asking questions. I'm not going to argue with you about that. But then if you do not go by or follow that principle, then nothing can be done about it. But then please do understand that we're just talking about a road or highway works and also sewage treatment facilities. These are infrastructure facilities, and of course there are other works involved. Yes, Mr. Andrew Wen. Well, Chairman, we have been following what you suggested. And in fact, we should not be confining ourselves to the issues raised in the paragraph. But then, as chairman, you've been imposing certain restrictions on us. But then, well, we're talking about bus routes, and also he's from the relevant district council. How come he was allowed to ask questions and he was given 3 chances? I think this is not fair, chairman. Well, it's always difficult to be the chairman because Eddie Chu was the first to ask questions, and so how come I should not be permitting Holden Chow to ask questions. Well, if you argue with me time and again about these, then people will be questioning why matters are being delayed so much in this committee. And after a while, we should understand one another better, and we should know what questions would be permitted and what not. So I respect what you said, Chairman. I hope that that could be recorded on record. Next, Mr. Nathan Law, 5 minutes. Chairman, you talk about sewage treatment and also the footpaths, cycling track, and so on. Well, we should be asking questions on those. Yes, members might have questions on those areas, but then you said that after the discussion at the District Council, apparently we should no longer ask questions in relation to those areas because there have been chances for those to be discussed already. But then what about public housing development? All right, if I have no idea as to how many units there will be, then what can I say? So we can only focus on Area 54. So apparently you're saying that whenever issues have been discussed at the District Council, we would no longer be permitted to discuss that. But what about wet market? Yes, it's a localized issue. But then what about public housing development? I think everybody has a duty to look at overall public housing development. It's not just about Tung Chung. It's not about the District Council. It's about overall housing supply in Hong Kong. We should rightly be asking questions of those nature. So for Area 54, when will we be able to discuss that? All right, are they going to build only HOS flats, or are they going to build public rental housing flats there? And if we are not able to discuss that on other occasions, then this is the only occasion when I can discuss that, because this has to do with infrastructure works and what kind of housing will be provided in a particular area. Why can't we ask questions of those? And if you permit, I'd like to know more about this. Well, we rarely heard the administration explain about the ratio between public rental housing and HOS flats. And of course, the officials here might not be from that section. So I hope that the administration can give us a written reply. How come all the units will be HOS flats instead of rental units? And then when I try to read the minutes, there's no mention of that, and apparently we've been told that this is not within the scope of discussion. But then you will have to respond to the questions raised in the community, and the public would need to have an answer on that. So that is the first question. Second is about wet market provision. All right, in Tung Chung, other than the wet market in Yu Ying estate, Futong is the only estate with a wet market, but then it's a very small one. So have you done any calculation as to the size of the wet market before the need of the local residents can be met? Because I understand that for Futong Estate residents, well, they have a hard time doing their grocery shopping because the prices there in the wet market would be very high. Fortunately, it's still a wet market under the management of the housing department. Still, it's not able to meet the needs of the residents. So do you have any indicator, for example, on this occasion, you're going to build this public housing project and yet there is no wet market available? Is it that you think that is already adequate? Mr. Leung? Well, on the issue of wet markets, I'll defer to Ms. Tam from the Housing Department. Well, at the time, well, in Ying Tong Estate, the wet market was provided. Well, when we did the planning, we already conducted a survey, and it's a study on how many residents would be served by that wet market, and also whether the 40 stores would be adequate. At the time, according to the study report that was done a few years ago, and it says that other than Ying Tong Estate residents, well, in Tong Wan Sing Hui, the residents there can also patronize this market, and even in Tung Chung, the residents there can also come and use the wet market, and therefore the utilization rate should be quite high, and therefore there is no need for us to set up another wet market in Area 54. But then, as we said, we have a commercial facility in Area 54, and for fresh food items, they can also be offered there. What about the cycle track? Because in Tung Chung, very often they have a problem because when you ride on a bicycle, all of a sudden you would run into a footpath, and then you will have to stop, and then you will have to come down, and then you will have to push your bicycle for a while before you can ride on it again. So these are the problems encountered in Tung Chung. So I'd like to know more about the cycle tracks in the design. Can you reduce the chance or the sections whereby the cyclists will have to come down and push their bicycles instead of riding on them?
Mr. Lam, well, for this question, at the last PWSC meeting, we have already answered it. In Area 54 of Tung Chung, at Yinghe Road, there will be a cycle track. And in Tung Chung East and Tung Chung West, in the future, there will be a series of cycle tracks. Last time, members also asked this question. So in Tung Chung East and West, we will conduct a study, and we will be looking at all the cycle tracks. We will try to make improvements to the network so that the cycle track will be smoother. I would like to remind you, just now Mr. Nathan Law has given us a good example. Yes, you can write your questions to me, and you can also invite the relevant government officials to your office for discussion. So this is not the only channel. Well, I asked whether the district councils have discussed this, and I don't want the FC to become another district council. You have to understand our difficulties. We will be breaking for the summer recess in less than 2 months' time. Well, this is not a controversial project, so I hope that we can speed up. A lot of projects are in the line, and many of them are controversial. Now I have to reserve time for those because it may take dozens of hours to discuss those projects. Now this project is not controversial at all, so we shouldn't waste too much time on it. I do not want to be scolded by you. You have to understand my intention. I just want to run the meetings in a smoother manner. Professor Yu Chung Yim, this question is not for the government. Many members were asking questions about public housing developments, and they would be asking questions about the future constructions of public housing. Well, they have their reasons because this are different from non-housing authority projects. Now, yes, we are talking about the infrastructure, and when the superstructure is built, they will come back for funding. But for HA, when it builds public housing, it doesn't have to come back to LegCo for funding. So at the stage of building infrastructures, we will have to do all the discussions. Otherwise, we don't have another chance to do it. So I hope the chairman would understand this. That is, anything that's related to public housing, while we are discussing the relevant infrastructure, you should allow members to ask questions concerning the topside developments and the relevant facilities. Otherwise, you will be misleading us. That is, now we are only allowed to talk about the infrastructure works, and we shouldn't be asking questions about the future topside developments. If that is the case, we will never have a chance to discuss that, and we will not be able to play our roles as gatekeepers. Now we want to know about wet markets and other community facilities. We won't have another chance to talk about them because HA is not coming back for further funding. So I have to make it clear. This is the only time that we can talk about it. That is when we discuss infrastructure works. So, Chairman, in the future, whenever other infrastructure works concerning public housing development is discussed here in the future, I hope you will allow us to ask questions. Otherwise, it will affect our role as councillors. Professor Yim, you always have the chance to be
a gatekeeper, but I suggest that there are other channels. You can ask a lot of questions at the relevance panel or the PWSC. Those are platforms where we can find out more about the project's details. But there are things that this committee should discuss. I understand that you are very concerned about it. You really have good intention. You want to be good gatekeepers. But this is not the appropriate platform. And please let me finish. I didn't interrupt you when you spoke, so please do not interrupt me when I speak. Now, you can ask the government officials to come to your office to talk to you. If they're reluctant to do that, please tell me. I'll advise them to do so. And Mr. Eddie G has points. I think those questions should also be raised in writing, so don't take up too much time of this meeting. If you are not allowed to ask questions at this meeting, it doesn't mean that you cannot be a good gatekeeper. This is not the truth. Chairman, I agree with you on what you said just now. Now, for this term, we have many new members, and they may not be too familiar with the procedures. I would like to tell you this. For a project, well, there are many experienced engineers on the part of the government. They have carried out a lot of studies, and they have looked at the project in great details. They would also have to consult people in that community. They have to talk to the relevant district council, the relevant organizations, etc. They have heard a lot of views. And then they came to our housing panel, and then they would go to the PWSC. So if you have any questions, you can also raise them at the PWSC. And eventually they would come to the Finance Committee. And then we will talk about funding. So they have already gone through a lot of obstacles. And you want to ask all questions afresh here? I want to tell you that there are 5 very experienced engineers sitting here. I believe they have a lot of information, and they have listened to the views of the relevant communities, and they have made revisions according to their views. So I think here we should just be talking about financial arrangements. We shouldn't be talking about engineering. So, Chairman, I hope that you can convince our new members. A lot of construction workers will become unemployed if we drag our feet like this. I don't think this is what you want to see. They indeed will face unemployment. So for projects like this, it's for building public housing, and everyone welcome it. A lot of people would like to live in public housing. So please do not filibuster on these projects. So I call on you to have a better understanding of the different functions of different committees. This is a friendly advice. Dr. Kwok, I think I became a legislator earlier than Ann Chang and you, Chairman. And for the Finance Committee, we are not just talking about financial arrangements here. Members would not just raise meaningless questions here, and don't always accuse us of filibustering. I think this is an irresponsible remark. Now, when we ask questions about this project, we are asking them for the future residents of the public housing here. We are not asking questions for ourselves. So you should pay attention to what you say. And before the government gets the funding at different stages, no matter whether it's at a housing panel or at a PWSC, government officials have to pay attention to this. That is, we are raising questions, and they should answer them. No matter whether these questions about infrastructure or about the future public housing, these questions have to be answered. Now, we would also ask questions about public facilities, for example, schools and hostels. And there must be appropriate traffic arrangements. So how come these questions are unnecessary? We always respect the chairman as someone who should conduct a meeting smoothly. So don't just criticize members. This is not what you should do. You have your own view. You don't ask questions. You just trust the government. This is your attitude. But you shouldn't stop us from asking questions. And secondly, I want to ask questions concerning this project. Now, people may ask the government this. That is, in the future, in this area, will there be wet markets and other ancillary facilities? So for the infrastructure works, will they be adequate for this purpose? And also, will there be homes for the elderly and the vulnerable groups? So when you build the infrastructure works, you have to bear this in mind. I would like to ask Ms. Anne-Marie Tam from Housing Department to answer this question. The member would like to know whether there will be a wet market. Well, there will be no wet market in Area 54, but in Area 56 there is a wet market. And we are now constructing it, and it will be completed in due course. So there will be a wet market in the vicinity. As for welfare facilities and services for the elderly, in our supplementary information, we've already mentioned this. That is, in Area 56, there are elderly homes. So for Area 54, there will be 10,000 people living there, but there will be no wet market, right? And for Area 54, there will be no homes or facilities for the elderly. If they have such a need, they have to go to Area 56, right? So from Area 56 to from Area 54 to 56, what facilities do you have? Are there pavements? Are there crossings? Would they be barrier-free for people with disabilities and the elderly? Ms. Tam? For the development of public housing estates, there will be barrier-free access. So the elderly and the people with disabilities can have access to Area 56. So can you tell me how long will it take for them to go there? Now, in the map, we haven't shown this clearly because this time around we are talking about infrastructure works for Area 54. So later on, maybe we can provide member with supplementary information. Now for Area 54 and 56, they are just separated by a private estate development. So it will take just a minute for people to walk from Area 54 to 56. I hope members can just speak your mind and don't criticize other people. Now, even though you've been a member for a long time, it doesn't mean that you are more reasonable than newer members. So you don't have to say that you have been here longer than other members. Mr. Jeremy Tam. You say that we shouldn't criticize other members. However, how come you didn't stop An Chiang from criticizing new members just now? I don't think you're using the same benchmark. Well, let's focus on this project. You should understand what I mean. We are wasting too much time on things that are not related to the project. That's a waste of time. I don't want to talk about this anymore because we have wasted too much time today on this. Well, Chairman, maybe I should give you my 5 minutes. Well, just say whatever that's important. So what you say is more important. We hope that we can all talk about policies at the panel level and FC. We shouldn't repeat the same questions. I have seen members engaged in verbal disputes at many meetings. So I just want to remind you that you shouldn't get so agitated and you shouldn't keep on criticizing other members and me. There's no need for doing that. Let's all focus on the project. Mr. Jeremy Tam. I've spoken for 17 seconds and you have spoken for 30 seconds. If you chair a meeting like that, we cannot go on. Now you interrupt me again. Well, if you are like that, I'll ask you to stop speaking. How come you say that? This is the first time I speak. I'll just speak for one round. Well, Mr. Tam, you are repeating what other members have been saying. Chairman, I haven't even started to speak. How can I repeat what other members have said? Now you keep on interrupting me, Chairman. Did you do this to other members or are you targeting me? Are you targeting me? I don't have the time to do that. Then why don't you stop speaking? Can you allow me to speak, Chairman? Of course I can allow you to speak. Please go on. Chairman. Well, for things that have been discussed at the PWSC, does it mean that we cannot even mention them here at the FC? Of course, no. Now, if you are always saying things that are not related to this subject and you're just repeating what other members say, then maybe I'll just read out this rule to you. Why don't you read it out? Then I'll keep on pressing the button. What's the meaning of doing all this? Chairman, I've said that I'll just speak for one round. I do not plan to press the button for a second round or a third round. I cannot trade with you. This is not a trade. Well, this is your problem. It's not my problem. I'll allow you to speak. Well, I just speak for several seconds and then you will interrupt. Are you so impatient, Chairman? I'm saying that for this project, I agree with Professor Yiu Chung Yim. We have to discuss all this. Otherwise, there will be no other chance for us to discuss these issues. I hope the chairman would respect us. That is, we have the right to ask questions. Chairman, I'm spending my own time on stating my position. It's that simple, but you've kept on interrupting me. You spoke even more than I did. You used my time to interrupt me. You kept on stopping me from speaking. Now, this is what I want to say. I don't want to waste councillors' time. If you want to talk to me about the rules, then you can talk to me after the meeting. You're done? Before I allow the next member to speak, I would like to read this out. Now, if the chairman discovers that a member continue to ask repeating questions, the chairman can instruct that member not to go on like this, unless you change the rules. Otherwise, the chairman has to enforce it. Well, it's not good if the chairman doesn't enforce the procedures, because the chairman has to ensure the efficient conduct of a meeting. Now, you can see that I have been very nice to you. If you want to ask relevant questions, I'll always allow you to do that, but you are digressing. So I will not say sorry for something that's right. This is stated very clearly here. I didn't invent it. Now we have to clarify the principles, then we can be efficient. We can't spend all our time on criticizing other people. We have to stick to the same principles. I hope that you won't raise any more questions about the FC procedures. And we should focus on these projects and this funding application. Please do not digress anymore. Ms. Lau Siu-lai.
Chairman, I think I need to make this clear first. I've always been concerned about wet markets, so I'll be speaking on wet markets, but my take may be a bit different from other members. I hope that you allow me to ask my questions. I understand that the administration is going to merge the public markets of two estates in their planning. I understand that there will be a market in Area 56 but not in Area 54. But if we refer to the planning standards and guidelines, there should be 45 to 50 stalls in the public market for a district population of 10,000. So I see that the administration is only following this minimum standard when there is a population of over 10,000. So my suggestion is to have more shops in Area 54 for selling fresh provisions. I understand there isn't a wet market in the plan, but if necessary, we can have shops selling perishables, fruits, etc. Mr. Leung, I'll defer to Ms. Tam of Housing Department. Thank you, Member, for the suggestion. As mentioned just now, in Area 54, Tung Chung, the commercial facilities planned will allow shopkeepers to sell fresh provisions, and as to what actually will be sold in the commercial facilities in the future, about a year before completion of the project, the relevant departments will decide what the trade should be. Whether some shops will be restaurants, whether some shops will be selling fresh provisions, and whether some shops will be a hair salon. So it will be decided according to the needs of the community. I've referred to the District Council's paper. They also ask for a market to be provided. I want to know by then whether you will consult the District Council again, and what criteria will you adopt in determining whether there should be a market. Ms. Tam, we've consulted the District Council twice, and we have sought their in-principle support. We're not going to consult the District Council again. About their request to have a wet market, as we explained, there is already a market planned in the vicinity in Area 56. The District Council asked for a municipal market or public market, and by then the Development Bureau and other departments will look into the matter and see if another market is needed in the extension area. Mr. Andrew Wan, 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Let me give a brief response, as I understand that this is being broadcast on the internet. And Chairman, I believe that many members already showed their appreciation of you as chairman, because you are rather lenient chairman, but don't tell us that you are open-minded and we can be allowed to speak as much as we like, because when the order comes, you need to uphold the rule and stop us. I'd like to clarify Dr. N. Chang's point. It's not the case that our construction workers can't find a job. We have, on the other hand, manpower shortage. That is why we have delays in infrastructure projects. Coming back to the paper, I want to say something about this concept in para 16. It is very good. At the planning and design stages, we have considered where possible, the construction waste should be minimized. I want to know how the construction waste can be minimized, because you also talked about recycling of inert construction waste. Does it mean that and you said that you estimated 22,500 tons of construction waste can be reused, or 31%, whereas 61% will be sent to public fill reception facilities. The cost is $71 per ton, but well, of course, we support minimizing or maximizing the use of recycled construction waste at the planning and design stages. I just want to know, at the construction stage, what can be done to minimize the waste to be sent to public fill reception facilities. Thank you, Chairman. Well, as far as the majority of construction waste generated, they will come from excavation works as well as construction of sewers. There will be excavated debris, which will be sent to the fill bank for reclamation projects. But we're not talking about a large amount of debris. At most, we will be laying pipes of 600 or 700 millimeters in diameter. It's not large trunks. So I can say that the construction waste generated will not be large in quantity. As for temporary office, it will be built not of timber but of steel panels. I don't think he got my question. I am not suggesting that the construction waste generated is huge. I'm saying that the concept is good in the sense that they're maximizing the use of recycled construction waste. I'm asking whether you can further maximize its use to save costs, because 61% of inert construction waste cannot be recycled and will have to be sent to public fill reception facilities at the unit charge rate of $71 per ton. Mr. Lam? As far as our design is concerned, we have strived to minimize the residual construction waste. And during the construction, our contractor will also need to submit a management plan of inert construction waste. And by then, we can work out with the contractor whether there are ways to further minimize the inert construction waste to be sent to public fill reception facilities. Thank you. I have asked my question, but I just want to say that, first of all, I am not going to ask other questions, and also the Democratic Party in principle supports this item. So please have some patience. We're not trying to trick you, Chairman. I have received the first motion under 37A. If you plan to move motions, please submit the motions to me as soon as possible. Dr. Kokaki. Be patient, Chairman. I have two questions. Now, you said that the residents in Area 54 can use the market in 56, but then they need to go through a private estate. For elderly people and the disabled, first of all, they may not be able to go via the public or the private estate. And second question, for the disabled, they may need walking aid to go all the way to Area 56. It's a very long journey. For the able-bodied, they may be able to find their way out, but for the elderly and the disabled, it's a long journey for them, and that is why I asked about road crossing facilities and barrier-free access. I don't agree that the problem can be solved by setting up a market in Area 56 only. For the housing department, well, for public housing estates, there should be proper community facilities, but I'm not going to argue with you about it. I'm just saying that there should be road crossing facilities for the convenience of the wheelchair-bound and the elderly people. Second question I'd like to ask about the cycle tracks. Does it mean that the tracks will be connected such that in Tung Chung to the north of Area 54 and also all the cycle tracks to the south of Area 54 will be connected so that we can have a connected track, because now we see a fragmented track. Cyclists are unable to use the track. And second issue, parking facilities for bicycles is a major issue for them. Will there be parking facilities for bicycles for cyclists? Otherwise, it's pointless just to build a cycle track. Mr. Leung. Thank you, Chairman. About Dr. Kwok's two questions, pedestrian crossing facilities, we're going to submit a plan for your information. Second question, I'd like to defer to Mr. Lam, Director of CED, to explain about the cycle tracks. Thank you. About the cycle track at the Public Works Subcommittee, some members also expressed concern about this. And in our supplementary paper, PWSC 1617-01, in March, the paper was submitted to this Council. The member asked about the cycle track. Along Ying Hei Road, the track will be connected to Tung Chung Promenade Road all the way to Tung Chung Town Center. In the future, it will also be connected to Tung Chung East, so that Tung Chung East, Tung Chung, and Tung Chung West will be provided with a smooth cycle track spanning 12 kilometers. And we also answered members' question just now. If there are hiccups along the cycle track, in our Tung Chung West study, we'll look into ways to enhance the accessibility of the cycling track in Tung Chung. What about parking spaces for bicycles and also for pedestrian crossing facilities? Are they barrier-free? For pedestrian crossing facilities, yes, they will be barrier-free. Parking spaces for bicycles along Ying Hei Road, there will be a spot for parking 60 bicycles. 3 minutes, Mr. Eddie Ju. Thank you, Chairman. Well, somebody just now mentioned that the District Council discussed the project. I therefore printed out minutes of the District Council's meeting. I'd like to get a number of papers from the administration. These are studies, so that we can understand the administration's rationale. Well, I understand that this item will be put to a vote in a minute, Chairman. I still want these studies. First point, during the DC's discussion, Ms. Tam from the administration mentioned that the Housing Department will conduct a microclimate study in relation to Area 54 and the developments nearby, whether wall effect will be created. I'd like the administration to submit this microclimate study to this committee. I just need an electronic copy, no need to print it out. Just now, Ms. Tam also mentioned the market in Area 56. According to your calculation, taking into account the population in Area 56 and residents living nearby, an optimum can be achieved as far as the business of operators is concerned. I recall that a study was conducted. I'd like to have this study as well, because we need to understand your thinking later when deciding on the use of commercial facilities. And just now, Mr. Leung or Mr. Lam mentioned that a traffic impact assessment was conducted. Again, I'd like to have a copy of the TIA. I'd like to have the text of the TIA. 3 papers, Chairman. I'd like to get them from the administration. You're only asking for papers, right? Mr. Leung, please provide the papers later or arrange with the policy bureaus. Yes, we'll work out with the relevant departments what information in these studies can be released for members' information. We'll follow up on his request. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to clarify one point. I don't know if I got it correct. About parking spaces for bicycles, did he say 10 spaces? Correct. Chairman, there are 3,300 units in the area with a population of over 10,000. The general public regards Tung Chung as a rural area. How can you just have 60 parking spaces? Even for parking spaces for private cars, you are going to have more than 60. Are you going to provide more parking spaces for bicycles? Even 600 are not sufficient. So first question, why do you only have 60 in your design? At least you should have 600 to meet the demand. And that's the first question. Second question, you talk about connecting the trunks of cycling track, and the whole length will be therefore 12 kilometers? Mr. Leung, please tell me yes or no. Is it 12 kilometers? I'd like to ask Mr. Lam from CDD to take your question. Thank you. For Tung Chung East, Tung Chung West, together with the Tung Chung extension, altogether the track will span 12 kilometers. Chairman, I understand that in principle no jogging is allowed on the track, but if it's as long as 12 kilometers, definitely there will be joggers. I don't know whether you have taken this into account. For people in Tung Chung, well, we have enthusiasts in cycling, hiking, jogging. Although we are not talking about this topic today, but you should provide sports venue or facilities for the residents. I do think that the cycling track of 12 kilometers is ideal for joggers. Well, can you also incorporate this in your design, and also to increase the number of bicycle parking spaces? Mr. Leung. Well, for the 60 parking spaces, they will be situated on the pavement, whereas for the housing development projects in the area, they also come with 220 parking spaces. And the CDD colleagues can consider whether to increase the number of parking spaces from 60 to 90. But in fact, 90 will be far from sufficient. We're talking about a community of over 10,000 with 3,300 units, and if there are only 220 parking spaces, they won't be sufficient. That's even the case in Tin Shui Wai, let alone Tung Chung. Mr. Leung. Our major consideration is to follow the standards in the Hong Kong PSG. Then that will be a problem. That may be all right in an urban district, but not in a rural area. Are you going to increase the number? Can you increase the number? Ms. Tam from Housing Department can supplement. Like Mr. Leung said, basically, we follow the standards laid down in the Hong Kong PSG. We also have a plan that we discussed with the planning department, and we believe the number should be sufficient. But subject to members' comments, perhaps at our detailed design stage, we can see whether we can increase the number. But that depends on whether we can identify a suitable location for that. I'm just concerned that it will be a management issue in the future, because bicycle is an important means of transport in Tung Chung. And I can say the parking spaces are not sufficient, and it will be a management problem. What about allowing joggers to jog along the cycle track? It's 12 kilometers, ideal for jogging. I'd like Mr. Lam to supplement. Thank you, Chairman. Well, the 12-kilometer track would definitely facilitate cyclists. And in Tung Chung West, there are spots where joggers can use. For example, along the waterfront, we have waterfront promenade.
They are all suitable for joggers to use. Thank you. Mr. Lam Kwok Hong, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Well, you often talk about planning parameters. Well, in Tung Chung, initially when you did the planning, so what's the size of the population that you projected? So what's the size of the population when you did the planning initially? Mr. Leung, do you have the figure? Chairman, I don't have the information with me. All right. In the 90s, when you publicized Tung Chung as a livable district, you said that there would be 100,000+ people there. Was that the case, Mr. Leung? Well, sorry, I don't have the information with me. That's why you said those things so casually. So apparently you said that everything was done in accordance with the planning standards. All right. The number of parking spaces were planned a long time ago. But what if I go to Tung Chung? Well, if I had been overseas for a long time, then I would not have recognized it. So where do you live? Do you live in Canada or in the US? All right. At present, the demand for bicycles would be very high. That's because of your wrong calculation, because many people are now used to riding on bicycles these days. Because this very morning, when we discussed the issue at the transport panel, we said that bicycles should be allowed into the compartments of the cars or trains so that they do not have to remove the wheels. In the past, it was not allowed, but then after the wheels are removed, then people would have to hold on to their wheels, and there is no way that they can grasp the hose in the train compartment. So have you conducted any surveys? In Tung Chung, what's the demand for bicycles in Tung Chung? So have you conducted that sort of studies? Well, I know the planning standards, but what about the actual surveys? Well, on Tung Chung planning, I'll see if Mr. Lam has anything to add. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I don't have the information with me about any survey that has been done. But then, according to my understanding, in the planning process for Tung Chung extension, well, wherever we can build cycle tracks, we would try our best to do it in order to meet the needs of the cyclists. Well, sir, if you have the cycle tracks but not the parking spaces, that's a problem. All right, that's the problem in Hong Kong. It's very expensive to buy a car, and yet there is no parking space available for cars. So for those members from NT West, in Chingyi, apparently there is no parking space, and the entire district has been turned into a big car park. So do you know that? Okay, according to your answer, you know that people like to ride on bicycles. That's why you have cycle tracks for them to use, and you've already accepted the fact that many people are using them as mode of transport. But then is it that they don't have to park their bicycles? Have you been to NT West and NT East? Have you seen bicycles or cars that have been parked near the guard railings as if they were dead, and they have been left there as if they were abandoned, and then that would cause environmental problems, and then when people are no longer able to put up with that, they would just abandon their bicycles because there is no way that they can find a proper parking space for their bicycles. So my question for you is, okay, this gentleman, Well, do we have anybody from the planning department? When did you come up with your latest planning standards and guidelines? In every district or for every 10,000 people, how many parking spaces there should be? You should have record about that, right? So they should not have been the records that have gone vanished, right? Do you have those records? Well, on the HKPSG, I'll defer to Ms. Tam from the Housing Department. Thank you, Chairman. Well, in our design, when we plan for the facilities, well, in Area 54, according to the HKPSG, for every 15 units, we would have one bicycle. When was it designed? When was it last revised? When we did the design, we followed the latest PSG. So when was it set? When was it revised last time? Mr. Lang Yu-chong, 4 minutes. Well, Chairman, in Hong Shui Kiu and also Kutong North, according to the government's planning, they have been planned to become smoke-free cities. So that's to improve the environment. Well, in Tung Chong, nothing similar was planned for, but then is a relatively suburb area, and therefore, when it comes to bicycles, even if they are not used by local residents as the government, when you plan for the development, you should have encouraged people to use bicycles as the mode of transport so that they can just park and ride their bicycles to the station where they can take the trains and public transport. So how come there is only one parking space for every 15 units? Well, very simply put, well, all you need to do is to go to Tin Shui Wai. Well, bicycles are everywhere, and then you can just close your eyes and do your planning. So have you ever been to the new towns? The demand for bicycles is very huge. So you've never been there. We're in Sha Tin and Tai Wai. So have you ever made any reference to those areas? So how can it be that there would only be one parking space for every 15 units? I just can't believe it. Okay, I have to declare it because I like jogging. So with a 12-kilometer cycle track, I would definitely be jogging on it. All right, you understand that there are other places available, but then with a 12-kilometer long cycle track, then everybody would like to jog along it. And if you do not have jogging facilities there, then you are wasting it. It's a waste of the resources. And if you're not allowing people to jog along it, then it's not going to work. So you should have designed it as a jogging path as well. Mr. Leung, well, we will take on board the views of Mr. Leung, and I'll defer to the Chief Engineer from the Housing Department, Mr. Yip, to respond. Well, concerning the design of the cycle track, according to Ms. Tam just now, we looked at the public housing development plan and the nearest train station or MTR station. So that's the standard. All right, as the nearest Tung Chung station is less than 2 kilometers from the housing development project, then according to the HKPSG, we can only provide 220 parking spaces for bicycles there. Mr. Lang Yu-chong? Well, less than 2 kilometers. I don't quite get it. Well, generally speaking, amongst the residents, well, they'd rather ride on a bicycle, even if it's just 1 to 2 kilometers distance, then they'd rather park their bicycles and then they take the train. So that's the habit. And if you do not encourage that, then nothing can be said about it. And if you do not encourage that sort of lifestyle, then why or on what basis would you be encouraging people to use bicycles? It's not just about going to the train station or MTR station. They also use the bicycles to go elsewhere. And also, you haven't answered the question on jogging on the cycle track. So, what's your answer to that? Mr. Lang? Well, for design of new towns, usually the pedestrian walkway or the footpaths would be wider. Other than the cycle tracks for bicycles, we also have the waterfront promenade. It's also very suitable for jogging. So for joggers in new towns, as the pavement would be somewhat wider, so basically pedestrians or pavements would be right next to cycle tracks. So for the joggers, they can use the wide pavement for jogging? Thank you. Okay. We have discussed that for 1.5 hours already, and please do understand that this is not a controversial item, and we spent 1.5 hours on it already. This is not desirable. So please ask your questions, and then we will vote on the Section 37 or Rule 37 motions. Mr. Leung? Well, I was asking about the HKPSG. When was it last revised? So, who's going to answer that question? Housing Department. So, which version of the HKPSG did you base on when you did your planning? So when was it last revised? Ms. Tam, do you have anything to add? Well, when we did our design, well, we discussed that with the planning department, and we worked on the basis of the latest HKPSG when we did the planning. Understood. Okay, so I was asking when the latest HKPSG was revised. So you did not answer my question. Ms. Tam? When? Not why. If you don't have the information with you, then you will have to supply the information afterwards. In other words, you don't have the information with you, so it's very simple. Okay, so we have this saying that it's new wine in old bottles, or it's old wine in new bottles. It's the same. So this is an outdated standard. So it's been in use for 10,000 years, and you don't think there is a need to revise it, and therefore you haven't done it. So if you want it to be passed, let's say if you can double the number of parking spaces for bicycles, do you think it's a problem? So that's point number one. And number two, so this is a development perspective. You said that people would just be riding on the bicycles to the train station, and if it's just 2 kilometers, people would prefer to walk. But then, is it that they would only ride to the train station? They could also ride on their bicycles to other places. So it's not just for interchange purposes. And also, cycling is not a mode of transport. It's a recreation. So people do not necessarily have to ride on the bicycle to the train station before they take a train. So I think your concept is very confused. So are you encouraging Hong Kong people to do more exercise, right? If you do, then the price for that is that there is no place to park their bicycles, and if they park their bicycles on the street, then that would be causing a lot of obstruction. In fact, in the Eastern District, they've been doing that, and as a result, there have been fights, and if they just park their bicycles in the corridors, then people would argue with you, and then they could also have 3 points deducted under the demerit point system. So what are you doing? So as a lawmaker, if we do not speak on behalf of the public, then what's the point of being a lawmaker here? So why don't you just hide away? Okay, so do you know how many points will be deducted from them? So is there any difference if you place your sandals outside your doorstep? Do you know how many demerit points will be deducted from you? So whenever we put a question to you, whenever there is anything to do with daily life and daily necessities, you have no idea whatsoever. So where did you come from? Are you from Canada? So you're just getting your pay, and you have no idea what life is like here in Hong Kong. So whenever we ask you anything down to earth, you have no idea. So Hong Kong government is very detached from reality. All right, let's allow them to pass the motion or pass the proposal. All right, Fernando Jiang, 3 minutes. All right, in area 54, we're going to have about 10,000 people. But when it comes to welfare facilities, there is no elderly center, and the nearest one will be in area 56. So it's in Ying Tong, and I can't find any elderly center there either. So for those elders living in area 54 in the future, well, for elders living in the future HOS scheme, and if they have to go to an elderly center nearby, then where's the nearest one? And also, between these two areas, they're going to have 10,000 population respectively. So is there any community centers. Mr. Leung? Well, I'll have to defer to Ms. Tam from the Housing Department. Ms. Tam? Thank you, Chairman. Well, within Tung Chung downtown, we do have a community center. Well, according to the information at hand, for elderly centers, I don't have the distance. Maybe I can provide you with the information later. So what's the distance of the nearest elderly center from Area 54? Thank you. I am still concerned because after all, we are talking about 2 new development areas and they will have 10,000 people respectively. And then if you look at the ratio of those over 65, is about 16% of the total population, and in the future is going to rise further. So we have an aging population, and therefore the ratio of elders to the young will rise. So by that time, I think for those over the age of 65 in these 2 areas will definitely be over 16%. Well, very quickly they will reach 20%. And then for elders who would like to take part in activities in elderly centers nearby, then we can't locate anyone. So we have a hotel and we also have private residential developments, and then to the south is also residential development, and then to the north is the sea. So in areas 54 and 56, you will have to think about community facilities for the future elders and also disabled. So the current planning is not able to meet their needs. Okay, thank you, Mr. Leung. Any response? Thank you, Chairman. Concerning the questions raised by Dr. Jiang, in fact, in the Tung Chung East extension area, well, we have got a neighborhood center for the elders in the extension area. On top of that, we also have district support centers for the disabled. In fact, earlier on, in the electrical paper, such welfare facilities have been listed out, so members may wish to refer to the PWSC 184/16 to 17 bracket 01 and para 14 set out those facilities in detail in that paper. That's PWSC. That's a PWSC paper. What about the distance? Can you give an answer briefly? Well, for the distance, I'm afraid we will have to refer to the planning standards and also the arrangement of the pavement and also transport facilities before we make a decision. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Leung Yu Chong has pressed the button. So, Mr. Leung, well, after you've answered the question raised by Mr. Leung, we will put the matter to the vote. Yes, Mr. Leung. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'd like to ask a bit more about what Dr. Jiang was asking. For the community center, you said that it's not in this estate per se, it's located somewhere outside the estate. But then for every 10,000 population, we're going to have a district councillor. So there should have been more community facilities. So my question is, according to your planning, how many welfare facilities there will be, including youth centers? Well, you don't have a community center. What about youth center? And what about study rooms? Do you have study rooms there? Mr. Leung? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I'll defer to Ms. Tam. Thank you, Chairman. Well, as we just said, in the same paper, in Area 54 of Tung Chung, other than the fact that there will be a commercial facility, we also have a kindergarten and also a 6-classroom kindergarten, and also some leisure facilities, open space, ball courts, and so on. As to other welfare facilities, well, they will be provided and supported by welfare facilities in the neighboring district. So Area 54's needs will be met by neighboring districts. What about study rooms? Study rooms, do you have that? No. But usually in housing estates development, we would not set aside places for study rooms, and the housing estate itself can run such facilities. And where there is such a need, then the housing estate itself can also, in fact, at the ground floor of each block, they can have some space reserved for recreational purposes, and they can always convert those facilities into other facilities, and that can be done by the estate itself. As to the planning standards and guidelines, we simply don't have that provision.
Well, Chairman, after population intake, it's very difficult to add such facilities, and the management will be very complicated and troublesome. So why can't you build such facilities beforehand? I think for the community, study rooms are really necessary because the housing units are getting smaller and smaller. So you really need such space for students. So why can't you plan it in advance? Now, if you want study rooms to be provided by government departments, then the relevant government departments would have to make such a request, and then we will build such facilities in advance. Now, for the OZP, we have talked to different government departments before formulating it, and there's not such a need. And if you talk about tutorial schools, they can be accommodated in our commercial facilities. Now I'm talking about study rooms for students. Can you take that into consideration? Now the FC has received 3 motions from Mr. Eddie G, and his motions will be projected onto the screen. I now put the following motion to vote. That is, we will handle Mr. Adig's motions. 5 minutes. Please ring the bell for 5 minutes. Mr. Adig, can you read out your motion? I'm sorry, I can't even read it. You have 5 minutes. A lot of time. Mr. Leung Yu-chung mentioned bicycles is really good. In accordance with Rule 37A, I move the following motion. That is, in Area 50 for Dongchong, the number of bicycle parking spaces should be increased to 200 or above so as to meet the needs of the residents. If you want to move any other motion under 37A, please do it as soon as possible.
暫時3條。冇其他委員交俾我，而家係截止。
Well, there are no other motions, so I'll draw a line here. So far, we have received 3 motions.
最難搞嘅。朱凱廸議員其實唔係嘅，一通。
Mr. Edigi, well, once we pass this motion, we will have a very lengthy discussion.
現在開始。
Now let us start voting. Voting closes. Result displayed. 21 yes, 26 no, 0 abstain. The motion has been negatived. Next, Mr. Edigi. 5 minutes, please. In accordance with Rule 37A of the FC procedure, we ask the government to do the following. That is, after the tendering exercise, the contractor that's awarded the tender should provide a environmental protection plan for the project. Maybe the clerk can explain about this. The clerk thinks that I should be speaking instead. Well, you should be talking about the roads and the cycle track. And it's not like what you say, that is a certain percentage should be allocated for public housing, etc., because we are talking about a very narrow topic here. As for the amount of money, is about policy. Maybe at the housing panel meeting, you could discuss this with An Cheung. No, it should be McMagun. Well, the chairman is under a lot of pressure. Now you understand. I would always make the wrong remarks under such huge pressure.
好啊好啊，多謝你轉達啊，轉達啊。三條，三條。如果我都未必夠時間做埋下一個，未必解決到。都休息翻嚟再表決。現在開始表決。
Voting starts. Voting closes. The result is displayed. 22 yes, 26 no, 0 abstain. The motion is negative. The next motion, please. Please ring the bell for 5 minutes. In accordance with paragraph 37A of the FC procedure, this committee urges the government to do the following. That is, on the cycle track, there should be no traffic light and it should be a through road.
如果 商量下呢，因為我哋而家個時間。
Let me discuss this with you. Now we only have 3 minutes left for this session after the voting. You can choose to raise your hands now, or we can wait for the end of the 5-minute bell. So after doing this, I'll ask you these questions again. So if you raise your hands, we have enough time. But if you want to do a division, then we will have to wait for the 5 minutes to finish.
Now
we are dealing with the last 37A motion. Voting starts. Voting closes and the result is displayed. 21 yes, 29 no, 0 abstention. And this motion is negative. If members have no other questions, now I will put this paper to the vote. Those in favor of the proposal, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. I think a majority of the members voting are in favor of the proposal. Thank you. Please come back at 5:45.